right, welcome everyone to our webinar today. I'm very pleased to have Spencer Parker on me with this call. My name is Floris Duvekot from Secura, behavioural, and today we'll be talking about quantifying the human risk in cybersecurity. I'll just and I think that today Spencer will talk about more how you can do that, and we will both talk about our jointly passion on how to involve psychology in cybersecurity in that part. Today we've got a program where we will deep dive into psychology in a bit. On the third section, we'll look into quantifying human risk. And if there's any questions for the audience, please post them in the chat. We are also recording this, but we will answer your questions after the webinar. So if there are any questions, please let us know. But before we start, maybe it's good to highlight a little bit who we are and why we work together, because I think Secura is a cybersecurity firm that focuses on all aspects in cybersecurity in people, process, and technology, and we're divided into market groups where we focus on pen testing, red teaming, and have a link to security where we look to standards, metrics, and certification, where we think that security is a matter of people, process, and technology. And I think today, Spencer, and I'll introduce you now, we will talk about especially metrics, people, and the involvement of technology to quantify that human risk. Maybe you would like to introduce yourself, Spencer, as well?
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Floris. Good afternoon, everybody. Yeah, I'm Spencer Parker. I'm Chief Product Officer here at OutThink. I've been with the company a grand total of 4 weeks now. So very new to this, but hopefully bringing 26 years of cybersecurity experience with me, and especially the last 6 years where I've headed up product at CrowdStrike.
Thank you, Spencer. What I'll first do is, I think that if you look at the human risk in cybersecurity, then if you look at cybersecurity today, you see on the left, you see cybersecurity spending annually, according to Gartner. And on the right, you see cybersecurity crime costs also annually increasing. And I think that, well, one of the questions we want to answer as well, how can we make sure that we bend the right curve to make sure that we control cybersecurity risks and especially human risk? Because if you look at the primary cause of data breaches, it's 90.7% that comes from the human factor. And that could be unconsciously by an employee sending data to an incorrect recipient, but it could also be from phishing attacks or from malware and ransomware. And so one of the questions we've asked ourselves is, why aren't security awareness efforts not paying off? Because if you look at the data, it's 90% of cybersecurity functions have an awareness program. It's 69% of employees admit to intentionally bypassing these. If you hear what I say, that's enormous. And 80% of cybersecurity functions have less than 1 FTE on awareness programs. Usually, what we see often is that there's an intern who's developing the roadmap, but on the process-related and on the technology-related side, there's a huge team to guide the organization with regard to defending against this risk. And there's 60% of cybersecurity leaders plan to keep awareness staffing levels flat. So that doesn't also, well, bring a bright future to focus more on this aspect of security. So, but one of the things that we saw is that everyone, or almost everyone, because 84% wants to focus on a measurable employee behavior change program, whereby the awareness program is not only creating awareness, but is also creating impact. So we thought it's time for a new path forward. Because if you look at the traditional approach for security awareness programs, you will have a population of employees, you will communicate about the guidelines, and you hope that everyone will do something else after telling them or instructing them the rules. So what Spencer and I thought about is we need to address new questions to CISOs. We need to address what is the current behavior and what are the needs of employees of your organization. And then usually a question back would be, how can we scale an approach focused on behavior, not only on creating awareness, and tailor and automate awareness training and interventions according to that. And that's how we come to quantifying human risk or quantifying actual behavior of employees. And we'll talk about that in a bit. But before we can do that, we need to very much understand the part of behavior, which is, according to us, necessary to also have a short deep dive into the psychology in cybersecurity. Because commonly, and also if you look at the data, it's easy to conclude that the biggest problem in cybersecurity is being the chair and the desk. It's the human. However, if you look at cybersecurity in organizations today and look at the budget spendings, then there's usually a one-size-fits-all program. We focus on rules, policies, processes for employees, and we focus on more or less which behavior is secure. We want people to wear their badge. We want people to choose a strong password or to lock their computer. And it's very easy to tell people to do that. It's very hard to actually influence their behavior. And that's why we from Secura work also with a team of psychologists who determine the actual barriers to see how we can influence it. Because mostly people are told how to behave. They get informed and instructed. And I think that, Spencer, you have a nice term for it. They get cyber-splained. We explain people in a way with buzzwords what to do, but then they might not understand. And then the conclusion is that people are the weakest link in cybersecurity. But knowing what is desired from people is not the same as being able to influence them. So we look from a psychologist's perspective. We look to the expertise on how to make people wear their badges, on how to make people use a strong password, and how to lock their computers. And I would say psychology there is the science of behavior, but we need to have some kind of technology in place to scale that and to quantify the expertise of psychologists into a larger organization. And that's something where we will talk about with the solution that OutThink will present. And it may seem easy, but people are very complex in this way. The fact that we are humans ourselves does not make us human experts. I think there's a lot of examples from the COVID pandemic where people were instructed not to keep 1 meter or 1.5 meters distance, but didn't do it. So we need to better understand why people do not behave accordingly. We ask them to behave. And we'll do that now for a bit by looking into fraud and cybercrime. And I'd like to give it over to you, Spencer, from here. I think you are able to control my the mouse pad.
Let's give that a try.
It works.
Oh, it worked twice there. Let's go back one. Excellent. Okay, so carry on from what Floris said. Why take a look at fraud and cybercrime here? I mean, first and foremost, it's a monetary thing. I mean, security is always risk versus cost. So how do we reduce our risk with as little cost as possible? And one of those things over the last 20 years has been security awareness training, but it's clearly not worked. It's stayed pretty much constant. 90% of all breaches have happened because of humans. Obviously, those attacks have got more advanced. So we've kept it at 90%, but we've never managed to make it go down. And we need to do that because we're losing a lot of money here. So one of the really sort of interesting, just little asides here, a lot of us use the term scam a lot, whether it be phishing, whether it be criminal stuff, the term scam, actually, the first time it was ever seen written down was in an interview with Steve McQueen, famous American actor, coined the term scam back in 1963. So just a little aside there. I mean, always useful for those pub quizzes. But yes, the scam comes from Steve McQueen himself. Let's drill into that a little bit further. I mean, essentially what it boils down to is what we term an illegal marketing offer. It is too good to be true. So they are selling you something and you buy it. And this is where it becomes interesting, because the group of people that have known how to manipulate humans the best over the last 100 years have been marketeers. And they themselves have what they call their 4 Ps of marketing. So if we look at those: promotion, product, place, price, all of these actually are how you influence humans to go do something they didn't know they wanted to do. You boil that down to phishing. How do you make them click on a link they shouldn't click on? How do you make them give their credentials in the web form that they shouldn't be doing? It's all about capturing people's credentials these days. So those 4 Ps of marketing are exactly how modern phishing emails work. They are trying to tell you to do something that's either too good to be true, or feels authoritative, or something else that we're going to talk about now. But always understand these, because you can boil all of the psychology of malware to the 4 Ps of marketing. What's interesting here, falling for one of these things is an error in judgment. The training tells you not to click on these things. You get trained every quarter or every year, and yet people still click on them. Interestingly, it's not the same people that always click on them. If it was the same people, you could just manage them out of the business and hire people that didn't click on bad things. Job done. Wouldn't even need to train people then. But it doesn't happen like that. We're all humans. So that betrayal of trust is there, and they are seeking to induce errors of judgment. Now let's have a look at the way that they do that. So there are error-provoking mechanisms. So first of all, there's no such thing here as a free lunch. So anything that is too good to be true is too good to be true. You have to ask yourself questions like, why is this aimed at me? Well, what have I done to deserve this prize from this African prince? How likely is it that I've won a lottery that I haven't even paid for? What are the hidden costs? Oh, I need to pay a fee to get access to this. What's the hook? Oh, loads of money. There is things here that should just, every time alarm bells go off, don't touch. And don't touch is the best approach here. Obviously, forward to your security team is the single best approach, but never respond to it. Because the quickest way to fall for a scam is to respond, because then they can do other error-provoking mechanisms in their responses to you to still make you do what they want you to do. So don't ever interact. You get put on a suckers list as well, that they'll target you even more once you've responded that once. Be careful here. So some of the recommendations that we give here, when there's visceral influences at play, if something is tempting, it doesn't make it true. It's a little bit like, all of the misinformation scams and things like that. Just because you want to believe in them doesn't make them true. There's failures of self-regulation. Self-control is a very limited resource in a human being. And we get tired and we lose those self-regulations, times of day. That's why we see most phishing emails arrive on a Friday evening. People are at their most tired, and they want to try and trick you when you are at your least self-regulating. Authority. I mean, talking of business email compromise emails, it's that authority. It's my CEO asking me to transfer that money, and it needs to be done now. Don't think about this email, just do it. That authority thing is amazing at making people do stuff. And overconfidence. I've lost count of the number of SOC teams over the years that I've spoken to who have, they themselves, been the source of a malware infection. Just because you think you know best does not mean you do the best. So ignorance and expertise in a specific field can lead to poor choices. Never assume you know best here. So don't be overconfident. Always question yourself. Make sure that you're looking for these other influences. And people of high imagination are often the easiest to phish. Wishing something true does not make it true. But people with high imaginations are more prone to that. So don't assume that this thing is true just because your head would love it to be. So when you look at those sort of typical phishing emails that come through, there's just a few sort of examples. I'm not going to spend too much time in here. This first one, is a typical business email compromise one. It looks like it's somebody of higher up in the business here. Could you do me a favor? There's a pending invoice from one of our providers. I'm on holiday, but can you take to the deadline is today? It's like authority. It's trying to provoke something. Don't think about this, just do it, etc. These are very typical. They from a detection standpoint, fairly difficult still to find because these are typical types of communications between people. So AIs have trouble differentiating between this and really when Liam did need something done urgently. So there's a lot of problems in here because of that. And again, looking here at this, it looks like a genuine Office 365. I mean, again, you've got to look at the problems here. Office 365 license is expired. My company runs on Office 365. If everyone gets that taken away, the company's losing money. I need to quickly sign back in here and put my credit card details in and pay for another year. These types of things are all things designed to create a lack of self-regulation. So typical things that we have to deal with. And these are the typical things that we have to train people against. But now that training has got even more important because things have got even more difficult. Now, everybody in this call has probably had a play with ChatGPT. These things are essentially being used now by adversaries out there. And they can be used very effectively because, how many times have we looked at an email that one of our users has clicked on and the English or Dutch is so poor that you think, how the hell did you not think this was dodgy? Well, the trouble now with things like these large language model AIs, where they can write in such clean, crisp English and other languages too, this becomes a problem because suddenly all of these emails look legit now. It doesn't look, it's not poorly spelt. In fact, actually, the fact it's got so little mistakes in it might actually be critical to detecting these things. These language models have very strict grammatical language models in them that these things, the outputs conform to, which no human actually conforms to the same strict level of grammatical output. So there is a hope here in detections. And when you look at these templates they use, they're now very easily editable out there. There's a phishing as a service out there called Greatness right now, which a lot of e-criminals are using. It uses ChatGPT at the back end to tweak templates based upon what people need them to, but make sure that those templates look professional, sound professional, and are crafted in the best ways possible to do that. Of course, ChatGPT says, we don't allow people to use it for things like that. Of course, they don't know it's being used for that. It's really simple. You can get yourself a ChatGPT prompt and do that very simply. Look here, provide 5 new variations on the following paragraph. What details do I provide? Update my direct deposit on record, change bank last week. I basically put some critical little things in there. These are the things that from a model that I'm building up to do the influence. And now ChatGPT has very nicely changed that into nice English for me. At no stage have I flagged this up as looking like I'm trying to phish somebody, and ChatGPT doesn't know that. But that is what these tools are doing. So we need to be aware of these. The other sort of unintended consequence of ChatGPT, though, as well, is that it can provide interesting feedback to help better understand and why certain tactics are being used successfully. So you can train it. These ones are clicked on more often than other ones. So what are the psychological elements in here that are working? So, you can even say to ChatGPT, reword this to make it more likely that somebody will click on this link. It looks really similar to pretty much every credential phishing email out there. You have to understand, what they've been trained on. What has ChatGPT been trained on? There's a lot of examples of phishing and things like that on the internet. It's probably all been sucked into here, and it's helping them. In fact, it's doing the work for them. So, you go, here's another output for ChatGPT. Create an email that has a high likelihood of a user clicking on the link. Boom, this looks just like pretty much every phishing template out there. And I've never once said I want to do this as a phishing exercise. So there's a lot of interesting ways that adversaries are using these tools. And as phishing training experts, we also have to use those same tools now for customers to tweak templates, do things, and do them the same way adversaries are doing, so that our simulation tests get as close to a real life test as possible. Because we need to train users on what they're actually going to see, not some DHL template delivery. Yeah, there's a lot of those sort of basic templates that they're there. People use them occasionally. It's not how phishing really happens today. There's some of those sort of large scale, sort of almost personal type attacks that people do like that. Very few companies, and most spam, will detect a DHL logo in an app, in an email that has no reputation at all. And at that point, it's like, no, this is spam. So very important that these tools are monitored, and we use those tools. The interesting thing, though, is, and this comes back to a quote, actually, it comes from CrowdStrike. You don't have a malware problem, you have an adversary problem. And these tools that are out there today, they are being used against you. There's a lot of OSINT tools out there around people, for instance. Adversaries, if you look at the MITRE attack framework, the very first thing is reconnaissance. How do you do reconnaissance against your people? There's LinkedIn, there's Facebook, there's all the social media networks that you can think of. People are promiscuous frienders, especially on LinkedIn, etc. It's very easy to get to know people and map out your environment very quickly, because once you can friend somebody in LinkedIn and see their connections, and you can build a model that's often sometimes more accurate than your own staffing models in your HR tool sometimes. But there's some really cool open source pieces of software out there. There's Spokio, That's Them, Lala, Yasni, Zaba. These are all free to use tools that are pulling together all these different sources of data about people and providing you a ton of OSINT information on them. Because what we see today often is that the person that receives the phishing email is not the target. And that seems a bit weird. Why wouldn't we target the CFO? If we want financial data, why wouldn't we target the CFO? Well, actually, CFOs on the whole are pretty well trained. They tend to be the least likely, actually, to click on bad stuff. So you target the CFO, you're highly unlikely to get a hit. So how do we target that person in a more effective way? And that is by targeting somebody within what we call their sphere of trust. And if you can own that person in that sphere of trust, you can use that trust to the CFO to get that CFO to do something that normally wouldn't happen. Not through just a simple email asking them to do something, but if that simple email comes from that person who they trust, much more likely to happen. This is what we call human lateral movement. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that as we get into here. So how do we quantify this human risk? What should we focus on? What users need training? What departments have higher click rates and why? Which users bigger risk? This all comes down to what we call human risk intelligence. This is not just about creating campaigns anymore. This is about targeting campaigns correctly to the right people who need the right type of training. Because ultimately, we're trying to change human behavior. And we're trying to do that in ways that actually work. We're well beyond the realms now of a little funny email telling them about stuff. You've got to be much more targeted now about nudging their behaviors and doing things here that actually do make a difference. So our human risk intelligence dashboard here. So I'm hoping this plays correctly now, doesn't just forward.
It should play.
I did click, but it's not moving. Do you want to just, Floris?
Yeah,
I just click it for it.
Oh yeah, now it's moving.
So what OutThink is doing here is we are building up a model of human connection. And we know who, from calendar invites, who people move to, who they regularly deal with. And we can go and maybe search for Troy Abbott here, our CFO. We can go and find out more about him. We can see here there's a sphere around Troy. So we're going to click on blue, who is Troy here, and we're going to see more information about him. But we'll also notice here there's a couple of red dots in there. So these are people that for various different reasons are higher risk within that sphere of influence. So by being able to see that and click on them, now we can target those people with the correct training to reduce their risk around the CFO. So we can add them to different groups. We're learning from their interactions with them, how engaged they are, what their knowledge of security behaviors are, how compliant they are, levels of confidence and productivity that we see from them and things like that. These are all signals to us that are telling us how we need to nudge this person forward. Because ultimately we are trying to change behavior, and we need to model that behavior out. And we need to be able to see that, because ultimately, as the humans in our business are our greatest asset. We hear a lot of people say, oh, humans are the single biggest risk. The reality is they're our greatest asset. Now we just need to empower them the right way, so they don't become the risk that they're perceived to be today. And often many of these risks are there because they can't get done what they need to do. So it's a failure of policy, not a failure of the human here around some of these things. And being able to turn these into human sensors that feed back through the security training the issues that they're facing, and being able to then surface that up to the CISO in policies, and surface that up to HR, and surface that up to the people that need that information. Turning these people into those human sensors is a critical piece of what we're trying to do here, because that traditional approach to cybersplaining does not work. The data proves it. 90% 20 years ago, 90% now. Things haven't changed, and they need to. So what we need to do then is look at the behavioral model. How do we have a behavioral model that can actually make those changes? There are obviously changes at the individual level that we need to influence and move and change continuously. There are group behavioral models here. Is the problem the management of this group? Is it lack of communication? Is it leadership? There's a ton of things here. And then there's organizational. A lot of these are productivity issues. So how do we make sure that we provide the tools that our users can still be productive without security being a burden? We hear a lot, I just signed up to Dropbox to share a file with a customer because I couldn't find a way of doing it internally. Now, there may well be an authorized way of using WeTransfer to do that, blah, 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 but the user couldn't find it for some reason. So that's a failure on policy, being able to show and tell the user exactly what they need to know to get their job done. So we need to be able to feed all of this back in as an OODA loop to turn people into our greatest assets. And only by continuous nudging and training and policy updates and getting our customers, from all levels of the business bought into this, will we ever make a change here. And the interesting thing here is from behavioral science. Our chief scientific advisor, Dr. Angela Sasse, she came up a few years ago with this model. Now, if you're familiar with the Johari window, it's based upon that. The Johari window is, what you know about yourself, what you don't know about yourself, what others know about you, and what neither of you know about yourself. And we've split that up into here. We're bringing in signals here so we can actively put people into this window and track them. Because again, for a security awareness training platform to really work, you have to be able to track change and track knowing what you're doing is making a difference. And being able to put people into this window based upon all the signals that we see means that we can change how we do training for that person that is the most effective for that type of person. So you're in the bottom left-hand corner there, you're what we call an abdicator. You're probably already checked out of the business. You don't care, you might be leaving, interviewing for another job, etc. There may be nothing we can do down there. But for everybody else, there are things we can do. We want to move people up and right all of the time. We also want to track people when they fall down and left. What is happening here to this person? Why are they no longer engaged? Why are they no longer doing what they used to do? So I think it's very important that, that we model this out and we surface this data. This is not to say that people in the bottom left should get fired because they're in the bottom left. Remember what I said about, the same people don't fall for the same things here. So there is risk all across this spectrum, but there's less risk as we get to the upper right. So we need to be able to get people from not being champions to being champions at the end of the day. Those are the people that are the least likely to fall for one of these phishing scams, for instance. So that behavioral science piece is critical to what we do here at OutThink. Could you move the slide on for me? It doesn't seem to be moving in a sec.
Yes, I can.
There we go.
Is it moved for you?
It has moved. So yeah,
we have two more slides, and then we have a short Q&A as well.
Absolutely. So we have to be able to show these things. We have to give people all of the dashboards that they need and where the risks are and all these type of typical type of product. I mean, we can't give you a product that is not as good as your current security awareness training and phishing platform. We've got to be able to be better than those first and foremost, but we've got to then build upon this journey of maturity that we have with our customers, moving them to what Gartner and actually what OutThink was the original vendor that spoke about this, which is a human risk management model. So this allows us to sort of keep moving the product forward here, and allows us to expose that information that is relevant and predict humans. We are sort of, one of the lofty goals of this is to be able to do human risk prediction. Who are going to be the people that are most likely to fall for things? These are the latest attacks today. Who do we think would fall for these attacks within the environment? Being able to take those feeds in of all the latest phishing emails and build that model on a constant basis is one of our real lofty goals here, and that allows us to do that. So one final slide from me. So what happens today? Phishing simulations, we collect who clicks on them, the credentials that are compromised, things like that. That's what you know today. But there's things that are missing here. You need to know the why. Why did the user click? So we need to be able to work that out, because once we know the reason why behind the click, and this is part of how our training is different and works. It's once you've clicked, we're actually in a conversation with one of our, with a sort of AI bot that's like questioning, like, this is what went wrong here. This is, could you tell us why you clicked here? And explain, and then we can explain to you better, what mistakes you made. Because, if somebody just failed to assess a bad URL, the most simple of the bit, then we need to give you a bit of training on how to assess a bad URL. It's that simple. Knowing the why means we target the follow-on things that happen to make sure it doesn't happen again. So it could just be the psychographic segments in apathetic. I'll click on that. I don't know what it is. Or it could be naive. They just don't know more, about these things. So they need coaching and training on them. All of this stuff means that we can target training better. And the way we do that is through turning humans into sensors, by giving those feedback loops in the training and the simulation, so we can know more about how they're thinking and why and what they're thinking. So we know then the reasons why they do what they do. So with that, only a few minutes over, which is a minor miracle for me. So Floris, I think we've got some time for some Q&A now.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Spencer, because it's very interesting to see how you're able to quantify the actual behavior of employees, and in the future also connect that behavior to a SOC or a SIEM to see the risk behind the computer. We have some questions from the audience, and I'll just stop the screen so everyone will see us as well. There's a question from someone who asked us, despite the recognition that education alone is insufficient to drive behavioral change, it remains apparent within the industry that the role of a security awareness officer is often treated as an additional responsibility rather than a dedicated person. in our opinion, why is this not a major drive to change this?
That's a great question. Now, there's a couple of answers to that. I think the first thing is that people have been doing this for 20 years now, and it's not worked. And when so you put somebody probably 15 years ago in the company doing that, and breaches were still happening, things like that. So probably people just thought, this is becoming more like a compliance checkbox than it is something that actually truly works. And it gets deprioritized then against all of those other priorities that are within the cybersecurity stack, which are all unbelievably important too. So it becomes that sort of, yeah, we'll do it. We'll say we're doing it. We probably need it for our cyber insurance, and we probably need it if we're in a, in a highly compliant vertical. We get it done, but it's maybe we'll only do it once per year, things like that. And this is one of the really bizarre things as well. A lot of the times the CISO is told by HR how many times they can do a campaign a year. It should be the CISO telling HR how many times they are doing campaigns in a year, because it has to be ongoing. And giving somebody a 2-minute video that makes them laugh once every year is clearly not working. And this is trying to reduce risk for the business here. I think some of the problems in the past as well, some of these videos have been really long. It could be 20, 30 minutes. And probably this is where HR have gone, how much that costs this company if everybody loses 30 minutes in a year? And that's the type of arguments they've been. So I think we need to get much more concise. I think there's trainings need to be more micro training, 1, 2, 3 minutes max, but more ongoing. I also think things need to be a lot more fun. These videos, everyone said, oh, well, if they're funny, people remember them more, which psychologically is true, but clearly it's still not working. It's because people are not engaged. And how do we make them more engaged? The first thing you do is you make this stuff fun. You don't make this so people go, oh, here's our yearly email on security training. I might do that in 3 months' time. Wouldn't it be great to go, oh, we've got a new one through. Great, well, let's go do it. Let's see what they're doing now. And we're looking at things like cyber escape rooms, things like that. How do you make this stuff more gamified, but in an actual game way? Not just because you get some stars at the end of a training thing that you can display in your little end user portal. No, you want this to engage people, because the more engaged they are, the more training they will have. So coming back, I know a bit of a long way around with the question here. So coming back to the actual question, I think the history has meant that this has been deprioritized, and I think some people have just given up. And the message to the people: don't give up on this. There are better ways to do this than what you're doing. There's some pretty much dinosaurs in this business that are milking it and don't really care anymore. It's like, just here's some videos, go watch them. No, this has got to be made to work. This is one of the final areas, I believe, of disruption in cybersecurity today. I like to think of myself as a disruption specialist. Came into CrowdStrike years and years ago, and we disrupted that market. It's the sort of thing I love doing. Now I'm going to do this again in this market. So for me, there's a lot of really cool ways we can do stuff that people just don't bother with. And I think getting engagement, and getting engagement, especially with younger people as well. Again, I think you have to realize, I'm 51 now. I've come to that sad realization that 50% of the people that I sell software to are half my age now. So it's like, the difference of a product between a Gen X, a Gen Y, and a Gen Z is really critical. Because if you want to engage Gen Z, you have got to gamify it. I'm not going to go quite as far as loot boxing them, but you've got to gamify it.
Yeah, and I think if you look back to the question, one of the things that we've done in the past so far is looking at a completion rate, a phishing click rate, and all the usual characteristics and statistics. But I think with the new technology, we're also able to, in the end, say which users form the main risk within our organization, instead of that we're now only looking at which users actually completed a certain training course. And And there's one other question I had, and that is one we get a lot from clients as well, is that if you are going to look at the real behavior of employees performing their work, surfing on the World Wide Web, is that something that, from a privacy point of view, is that something where you've experienced hesitation so far, or is this the new way how we're actually going to be able to showcase the actual risk instead of having other reasons not to comply to?
That's a great question again. So, how much data is too much data around people here? So, you know, and this is very different in different countries in the world. I mean, in the US, you know, there's no such thing as privacy. Whereas obviously in Europe, we are much more privacy focused than our American cousins. So, and even within Europe, you know, by the time you're talking to sort of in Germany, places like that, you know, workers' councils, everything feels like a negotiation at that point. But the reality here is that almost all of this data I'm taking right now from Microsoft Graph. It's there already, it's been done. So I'm not gathering in any more data than hasn't already been gathered in and already processed by Microsoft. And now I'm just using that processed data, which contains no PII information in it at all, to better predict against.
Yeah,
now,
but I think there the main difference is that now you're going to say Spencer is the one who's not only clicking on the emails, because that's what we can see in our Microsoft Defender solution, but he also forms the biggest risk to our organization. And I think there we have, yeah, we might have a challenge.
Only too well. I think, and yeah, I mean, this is always a question. It's like, you know, you're always going to, I think, maybe get some companies that say, right, that's a fireable offence. And do you know what? If people are really being that badly behaved, would they be fired?
Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, this is corporate policies. And if you are not following corporate policies and you are bringing untoward risk to the business, you know what? There's sometimes no amount of training is going to help you. That is the realization here. You know, this can't help everybody, but boy, it needs to reduce the 90% down to significantly. But I think that, you know, that becomes a management problem, not a technology problem, not a PII problem, because I think, you know, personally myself as a line manager, if I have a member of staff that is doing this, I need to know about it, because I need to have that conversation as a good manager to understand why they're doing what they're doing, and is there any way that they will stop it, please? Because if it's not, then I'm sorry, I might be looking to replace you. That is the realization that and I already had all of that data. It's just been in different silos in different places, and I could have asked for it and I could have tried to put it together myself. Now I'm getting it handed to me in a report every week. So I think there's a difference there. But I mean, when we talk to customers about this, we try to actually steer this into a positive conversation. This shouldn't be about how you fire people. This should be how those people that are doing things they're not get turned around and made good corporate citizens too.
Yeah, yeah. So, Spencer, there's a few other questions, but I've been informed we only have 1 minute left for the webinar. Is there something you would like to close with, a closing message on, well, how to start focusing on human risk, or how to have that conversation to shift from the traditional approach to a more approach focused on quantifying human risk?
Yeah, I think ultimately there is a journey here, and pretty much everybody's quite early on in that journey right now. So we've got to be able to take what we do today, which are the phishing training and the security awareness training pieces, and we've just got to do them better. Have those campaigns be a little bit more data driven, with more automated responses to what we see. So So the way that the OutThink system works at that most basic level there is that, we detect these things about people and then we automatically give them the training on it. So we can do, without even needing to do a human risk management training program and embrace everything. This is a journey for all of us, and we'd welcome you on that journey with us. And we believe that we can do this and make the right changes here and turn people into what we want them to be, which is our greatest asset.
Yeah, so I think it's starting the conversation towards human risk and trying that with the current initiatives and making it more data driven in a way. I think I would like to thank you for co-hosting this webinar today. From Secura and behavioural, and of course OutThink, we would like to thank all the participants and attendees as well. Thank you for the questions you've raised, and we will answer the other questions that are still open after the webinar to you. Then Spencer, thanks again, and I wish you all a great day. And if you would like to cooperate or have a conversation with us, please reach out, because I think this is the new way to go, to look more to the human risk in cybersecurity, to in the end fight the battle against having the human factor being the worst factor in cybersecurity, to making it the best factor in cybersecurity.